the latter, this is of course verse 17, he goes on, but the latter out from love, knowing that I am appointed to the defense of the gospel. And this word defense, apologia, is giving a legal defense, a verbal legal defense for why you believe something. And Paul did. Paul gave the facts, and he did it multiple times over and over again. He gave the facts. It wasn't an emotional experience, he gave the facts. You know, he met Christ on the Damascus Road, and then he spent some time with Christ, and then he came back and he began to present the truth. And he talks about the experience that he had, the facts of the experience. And then verse 18 goes on, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached. And in this I rejoice, and I will rejoice. So you have him being content in that area because Christ is actually being preached in the area as a direct result of his chains. Verse 19, he then goes, he actually expects to be released from prison at this point. Now, there are some who kind of get a few things mixed up here where they want to say that Paul was only in prison once. But if you really pay attention to, especially here in this writing, we're going to see he actually expects to be released. Where later, in other writings, especially to Timothy, he knows he's not going to be released. And in the way he actually writes it is very clear. So in verse 19, for I know that this will turn out for my deliverance. And your word deliverance is salvation here. So he's actually going to be delivered. And he intuitively knows that this will be delivered from his chains through your supplication and, of course, the supply from the Spirit of Christ. So through the supplication of the saints and through the support that he actually receives from the Spirit of Christ, because the Lord was with him and the Lord gave him what to say. And he presented a proper defense before the Romans. And the Romans were like, there's no reason, there's nothing to accuse this guy of. There's no reason he should actually be here, and they released him. But Paul also says in verse 20, according to my earnest expectation and hope, that in nothing I will be put to shame. Why? Because he's speaking the truth. So he's not going to be put to shame. But in all boldness, as always, so now also Christ may be magnified in my body, whether through life or through death. So he says, it doesn't matter to me whether I die or whether I live. It matters that I'm manifesting who I am in Christ. That's what actually matters. So his attitude towards that was to live out who he was in Christ. Paul knows that he is able to defend himself. But he's actually kind of hard-pressed on what direction he wants to go. Because in verse 21, when he's talking about life or death, he says, for me to live is Christ, for me to die is gain. There's no loss if I die. It's gain. But if I'm going to live, I'm going to continue to live out who I am in Christ. Verse 22 then goes on, but if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit from my labor, so I'll produce more fruit if I continue to live on. Yet, what shall I choose? I cannot tell, or I do not experientially know at this point. For I am hard-pressed between the two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. So he has that desire. He's hard-pressed between these